Artificial Intelligence, Law and Justice, Session 27. This session is on the impact of AI on labor law. In the previous session, we discussed about external AI in law and justice. We highlighted the issues and challenges in incorporating XAI in law and justice. We also pointed out that XAI should have an important role in adopting AI in law and justice despite challenges. In this session, we will look into how AI is impacting labor law, but a discipline or a field of law, and then why the relationship between AI and law and labor law should be understood, for the simple reason that labor law, although has been dealing with technological developments and the technological impact on labor for long, AI comes not just as a threat, or also as an opportunity, technology which can give opportunities, but AI also comes as a major game changer in employment, job, nature of employment, job, and much more than that. As we move towards the digital economy and the digital society, AI is going to have a much more role in all sorts of jobs, not just the permanent or not just the manufacturing jobs, but also all sorts of jobs, including the gig work, people who work from home, or people who work do remote work. So we need to pay more attention to the intricacies in impact of AI on labor law, particularly when AI is both feared as well as looked with wonder. So broadly speaking, labor law deals with rules governing legal relationships between employers and employees. Normally it is a state which runs or which decides on the labor law and then implements the labor law through labor department, and then we have labor courts, tribunals, and then other forums for adjudication and for contestation. So there are two levels of the things can be discussed here. One is the collective level, where trade unions are very active in the sense of collective rights, collective responsibilities, as well as collective decision making, in the sense that when the law itself authorizes a collective way of dealing with the employers. Then there are individual level of people who work as not as part of the collective, but in a different way. In the sense that gig workers, people who work remotely, or people who are on a contract basis, or people who are governed by some law, but then they are not unified, or they are not coming together as the member of a trade union or an association of the workers or association of employees. So labor law basically covers employees, employers, and then state how they interact, what sort of mechanism they evolve, so that there is least of industrial disputes, and then there is more a harmonious development of industrialization process. So labor law deals with employment primarily, but not just employment. It also deals with conditions of employment. It also deals with the way labor should be treated, and then it also deals with both the entitlements as well as rights for laborers. Similarly, it also comes up with, for the employers, not just obligations, but also what rights they have over labor, what rights they have, or what is the procedure they should adopt if someone has to be decided that that person will no longer work in that organization. So yeah, AI on labor law is a very fast developing field, partially because AI is there in almost many sectors now, and then there are a lot of legal uncertainties, there are a lot of queries, a lot of doubts, and then a lot of fears as well in that. But labor law has already dealt with many technologies in the past. In fact, labor law itself was an outcome of the industrial revolution's first phase, where there was a massive employment, industrialization brought in factories where thousands and thousands were working. So the society had to come to grips with the way it had never faced before, because never earlier people were working in small units, very scattered, but not in units. Or the industrial revolution made many things possible: centralized production, distribution, and then various ways of consuming the massive increase in production and all. So the labor law, if we trace its history to the ideas of that emerged during industrial revolution, and today we are talking about the fourth industrial revolution. Some people even say a fifth industrial revolution. It has to not only adapt, but it also interact continuously with the technological development. But can it influence technological development is a difficult and very different question to answer. So integration of AI in the workplace happens at all levels, whether you are a contract employer or whether you are a manager or whether you are in a supervisory role, it happens in that. But AI, when it is coming to the job market or the workplace, it changes the job responsibilities, it does division of labor also changes, and then more importantly, it creates many new opportunities for the labor. Often it replaces human labors either directly or indirectly with robots or tools of automation. So many of the labor rules would need some reassessment so that the rules themselves are much more adaptable and then agile to face large scale adoption of AI in manufacturing sector, in services sector, and broadly in all sectors. So AI can be a major disabler or major can be a major game changer when it comes to job stability. So it can also disrupt the economic environment by ensuring that some jobs are totally eliminated or people who are in some level of employment are not given the same amount as earlier because their jobs would have been either downgraded or the skill set that was needed for those jobs would have been totally replaced by automation, which includes AI as well. So there are also other issues like whether AI will impact negatively the current ongoing concerns on hiring, monitoring, and evaluation. We saw how AI could be used for evaluation in the case of teachers being evaluated through algorithmic decision making. And then monitoring is a huge thing because AI can be used for effectively monitoring surveillance of what the employers want the employees doing to know. And then there's a whole question of whether the labor legislations are in tune with times to face the consequence of AI being used in all sectors adequately. More importantly, the idea behind labor policy and labor legislation should ensure that on account of technological employment adoption, the workplace disparities should not become worse in the sense that the technological revolution should not make things worse for labor by making them poor or being totally replaced or displaced. But this is a global issue where countries really need to look together and understand and then look how they can deal with AI revolution effectively. International unions, trade unions are trying to deal with that. International labor organization is also trying to deal with that, where through its various programs and through capacity building programs, various research initiatives, including a lot of publications. So one way to look at is that we should demand a balanced approach that facilitates technological innovation, economic growth and progress, adoption of the latest technology for societal well-being without labor being unduly affected or resulting in mass displacement and mass unemployment, or to ensure that workers' rights are not totally eliminated or not negatively impacted by AI-based systems. So there are multiple challenges where stakeholders need to come together. And the Economic Survey 2025 has a chapter on impact of AI in employment, particularly in the Indian context. And then it does come up with a lot of interesting suggestions and observations. Since a detailed discussion of that is beyond the scope of this course, I am mentioning that in passing. But anyone is interested to know more on this topic, as we are talking of striking a balance between innovation and labor rights and the labor welfare, better to read that to get a understanding the way what things are happening in India in the broader context of AI and labor. So trade unions have a major role. They should be able to negotiate, but they should also understand technology. They should be able to understand how technology can be used positively, at the same time resisting massive replacement and the displacement. And they should also be able to get a fair, decent deal for labor, but that should not be at the cost of economic process or economic progress. So historical role of the trade unions has been playing the vanguard of the traders' right, of the workers' rights, and then trying to empower workers more and more. But in the context of AI and automation, it becomes all the more challenging for them because they seem to be marching unequally at a pace which people did not even anticipate a decade earlier. So, how to adapt to AI-driven challenge is a major challenge for organizations, employers, but it's equally a challenge for trade unions as well as for the people who are in the ground, people who are working in different sectors, in the factories, in the fields, who are working in various unorganized sector establishments, or people who are working on contract basis, or gig workers, or people who are working on remote. So, taking it a broader picture, we need to look at what sort of training and development can be done, whether the employees will have a role to say what sort of system should be developed, in the sense that they are not unduly affected, and then how their rights could be safeguarded and protected, if not made better. And then the job displacement, if should be confined to the least minimum, what should be done? Whether should we go for a social protection system that guarantees that those who are displaced are entitled for some minimum benefits in terms of cash, or in terms of some regular salary for some period, or in terms of some entitlement for capacity development or skill development. And then all these things are need to be looked in a broader policy perspective, and then in consultation with the stakeholders. Technological unemployment is not the one that is happening for the first time. It has happened earlier in the phases of industrial revolution, where automation replaced many jobs. Automation took over many jobs which are done by humans, and then that massive job unemployment was also dealt with by making social security measures, by retraining workers. But what happened was the overall employment opportunities expanded as economy expanded, as new avenues came, and then there was a shift that was from agriculture to factory or industry, and then from that to service. So while the overall employment opportunities uh, got enlarged on account of various other developments, technological unemployment did not balloon or did not become too much of a problem. Although it was a problem, although still it is a problem to some extent, it did not become something of a catastrophe. So, how to solve that in the case of AI related automation or digitization of life is a different question, because for the first time we are seeing a technology that is not only that could replace, but that could also do a lot of creative things, and then that could also be part of a larger automation where robots will be integrated. So one way is to upskill and then reskill, build capacity, lifelong learning, lifelong acquiring of new capacities, move up in the ladder from doing boring, monotonous, repetitive jobs to jobs that are much more interesting, that demand more skills. Then the digital economy transformation should be thought of part of that, because digital economy is not something which we can discuss or think without employers or without employees or without labor. So, if AI is going to drive the digital economy, what sort of employment opportunities will rise? What sort of employment opportunities will vanish? And how it will overall affect the employment situation is something that need to be pondered upon. So, the labor law has to be sensitive to deal with these things in an agile way. And then, if work roles are getting defined, if certain roles are going to be totally eliminated, what would happen to those people? I mean, can to what level of upskilling and then reskilling can make them to go for more jobs? Or if the job displacement is going to be too much or too unbearable for the society, mere upskilling and reskilling can be offered as a good solution for all types of jobs. And then the gig economy, where people are scattered or people are working on contractual employment, but then their numbers are increasing because economy is also increasing in numbers. And then there are a lot of people who work as part-time contract employees, or people who do a lot of remote work, or people do piecemeal work. So how these people will be affected by AI? What sort of livelihood options will emerge for them if AI revolution takes a step ahead and ahead? So these are some of the things that need to be dealt with, particularly from a labor law perspective. But from a labor law perspective, the counter thing could be that labor law can demand certain things from the employers. Labor law can make certain rights more secure. At the same time, labor law can also incorporate certain measures where it could be said that algorithmic decision making should not be brought in, surveillance should not be part of the labor work practice, and then there should be code of conduct, or there should be specific rules where employees should have the benefit of using explainable AI mechanisms if they are going to be adversely discriminated by the AI systems or by algorithmic decision making. So we need to bring in what we have discussed earlier in terms of tool making, algorithmic decision making, explainable AI, all into this specific context of labor law. And then when we try to relook at, we will get a better understanding rather than looking at labor law as a law that pertains only for labor and only for selected class of labor. So some of the reports which talk of level of displacement, what would happen in 2030 or 2050 are there. But the situation is changing so fast that some of the observations made in 2020 have become obsolete by now. So we need to have a understanding that is anticipatory in nature, in the sense that we should anticipate certain things in nature and plan without getting overwhelmed or overawed by technological developments. In the sense that we should refrain from taking a too positive approach that AI will have some minimum impact, but it can also increase enormously job and employment opportunities, or taking a negative view that AI is going to replace or displace about 80% of the workforce, and then in future it will be more of robots than workers who will be running the factories, who will be doing different things in different sectors, like robo drivers, cab drivers, robots who will be delivery agents, robots who will be sitting in cash counters in different stores. So we need to be free from the positive, overall positive, overtly positive, overtly negative perspectives, and look what labor law needs to do or how labor law should be tweaked to understand and then deal with these issues. So the policy and social support system, about which the economic survey talks well in detail, need to be looked into, and then policies have to be developed. And then a major role of the policy will be to strengthen, expand the scope of labor laws, as well as to bring in new systems of benefits to employees, as well as to ensure that they get some new rights when they have to deal with AI and automated decision making. So the remote work again, which is one of the major factors which rose in the post-COVID, is also a major factor. Now, AI-driven world, future labor and remote work are closely linked. But then future work can also be monitored, be surveilled by AI, because even now, lot of the people who do remote work know well that their behavior, the key strikes they strike, how many hours they spend before the computer, what sort of things they look, are being monitored by AI based tools and systems. So it is not that remote work is not linked with AI. AI is already there. AI is there as an unseen, unseeable supervisor which is monitoring all the behavior. So what sort of digital infrastructure and then we need to build, and then what sort of labor legislation we need to think, or some of the things. And then we talked about the legal policy framework that should comply with law, data protection, right to privacy, question of surveillance, monitoring the workers' behavior, and also the question of uh, power disparities between the people who are surveilled and then those who surveil, who do surveillance. These are some of the things that we need to really look into. Another thing which we talk of, the right to disconnect, particularly in the age of AI, is that lots and lots of jobs which people do today, whether it is remote based or whether people do it after working hours, have something in common in the sense that they are being done by computers or they are always on the web. In the sense that you are 24 hours connected to the web, to the internet. So when they do it, they are also being monitored by AI, or they are also use AI tools in one way or other. In the sense that their work is also depending upon AI tools, partially or fully, or AI tools help them in the back end in many ways. Like some may be using AI agents in the back end, or they may be using some tool like Copilot in the back end. So when this happens, the right to disconnect becomes very important. So the right to disconnect comes after the regular working hours or after the specified working hours. People should have the right to disconnect, and more importantly, when they disconnect, it also means that they should not be surveillanced upon after the working hours. So this will help people to have manage the work-life balance in a much better way, but it also ensure that they are not overtly controlled or they are not overtly followed by AI tools which monitor the behavior irrespective of whether they are online or not. So some of the companies are promoting good practices. Some of the countries are coming up with legislation where they forbid that the right to disconnect is there and no person should be forced to read and respond to official emails or to resort to some tools that work in the back end even after the working hours are over. So the right to disconnect also means that you have the right to disconnect with AI tools and free from AI tools doing a surveillance on you or free from AI tools being used after working hours. So this should be part of the larger framework of the labor law or the labor code when it wants to deal with AI. Then of course we can talk of enhancing human capacities, lifelong learning, upskilling, and then learning for better and all those things. But some of the things which we need to be aware of, this again is something not just related to AI, but also something that is related to neurotechnologies and the neuro wearables. Now the wearables are there, all of us wear in some context or other smartwatches which actually monitor our behavior, monitor our health conditions. But there are many people for different jobs, they do a lot of other variables, like I mean for lorry drivers, for hospital workers, for different type of workers in some sensitive operations, including workers in mines, and then some of the people who work 24 hours or who do shift work. They also do a lot of, they also do use lot of wearable devices or they have devices that monitor their behavior from remote. So when this happens, and AI is being used to collate information and then aggregate the information and then come to some decision or understanding of that, we need to bring in whether the labor law should also take into account the indirect or direct surveillance that occurs through wearables or devices that are connected to the person's body or devices that monitor a person's behavior and then his or her movements. So we need to bring in them also under the context of AI's impact in labor law. Then of course health and safety benefits are there. Then we need to look into the whole question of human in the loop model should be built in so that humans have access to data, decision making and all. Then the ethical considerations which include data governance thing and then real world performance and then more importantly how the labor should have access to the rights, access to the data which is collected on account of them when they are working and then how it is being used by them by the AI systems either against them or to arrive at a larger decision making. So these are some of the ethical and legal considerations that need to be figured in when we talk of AI impact in law, labor law. So if AI can be used creatively, it can do a lot of good things in the sense that a lot of unnecessary surveillance which is being done by AI can be avoided. Then of course there are a whole lot of privacy issues. Then there are of course whole lot of things like how many of the employees previous data which is collected on the employees working should be shared by the company with third parties or within the company itself, and then if the company should share the data with health insurance or with others for some other purpose also should be looked into. So then we need a framework which also look into that and then how to protect the personal information of the workers which is collected as part of their monitoring their work. Then balancing AI and labor law is a challenge, real challenge, where we need to make sure that the labor law is agile, flexible enough to come to grips with the changes and then ensure that labor law's primary objectives are not vitiated or not negated by deployment of AI in a large scale in the society. So it again means that the stakeholders we need to come together, we need to have a common understanding and a consensus on deployment of AI and then how to use labor law as a tool that could effectively help in harnessing AI. So the summary for this will be there is a positive and negative thing, but then we are at a stage where we are not very sure of what will be the better or the best options and what could be the most harmful options. But the labor law should develop in such a way that it broadly maintains or it broadly consolidates the available rights for the labor, but also builds upon that so that labor do not end up as a loser when AI is deployed on a wider scale. And it should also address newer and emerging concerns, particularly taking into account the gig workers, remote workers, and others who would be affected by AI enormously if the AI systems are not tailor made or are not based on ethical and responsible AI principles. In the next class, we will look at another aspect of law, that is health law, which is equally important and where AI is playing a huge role. So, AI and health law will be the next topic we will discuss. Thank you.